House Bill 1002 came out of committee yesterday by an 8-5 vote. I want to emphasize that House Democrats and most Democrats that I know want to vote for a bipartisan infrastructure investment. The need is recognized throughout Indiana. Infrastructure investments are good things because they create jobs, they cut down on the cost of time of moving goods and services, and they make it easier for people to have economic opportunities. So infrastructure investments make sense. There are some things, though, that are giving people a little grief. And I would encourage everyone to have a long-range view of this legislative process and what it will take to get that bipartisan agreement. Governors, when tough decisions are made, need bipartisanship. It becomes much easier to sell a tough decision when there is broad input. But we have a ways to go. Certainly, there has been a very large plan that's been proposed on the House Republican side. It's been looked at closely. It is the type of plan that when you walk into the country club, you're going to have someone walk up with a cocktail and compliment you on your courage. But when you get outside of the country club and down to the diner, you're probably going to get a little different reaction. One thing that is giving House Democrats some angst is the exacerbation of the tax shifts that are going to be continued by this measure. And the concept that while sacrifices may be needed, those sacrifices are not being shared. Some of those who've known me for a while know I'm a bit of a history buff, and I'm even a history buff when it comes to numbers. And I asked the staff to go back and look at some of the tax increases in past decades. First, we see the state sales tax. I know everyone in here remembers the first state sales tax happened under Governor Matt Welsh in 1963 when the first 2% sales tax was implemented. Went up to 4% under Governor St. Otis Bowen, who changed the property tax system, supplanting it with sales tax revenues. Went up again under Bob Orr during a financial crisis in 1983 to 5 cents, which we had for quite a while. Then it went up to 6 cents under Governor O'Bannon during a property tax crisis, and it went up to 7 cents again in 2008 under Governor Daniels as part of a second property tax crisis. There you see the burden shifted to workers and consumers. But those decisions were made when they were made, but that is the long-term consequence. Over here, I want to point to the growth of the motor fuel tax, which was started during World War II in 1943 at a 4-cent rate. Over the years, it has been raised periodically under administrations of mostly Republican, but occasionally Democratic governors. The last time being the one that I supported, which was a 3-cent increase in 2002. And we can see that if implemented under House Bill 1002, it would increase to 28 cents should that bill become law. However, at the same time, we have to look at the corporate tax rates, which, as you can see, sat at 8.5% for a number of years, which predate the 2004 date here. And you can see where they are going and where they are projected to go. This is bothering people. If they're being asked to pay more, they think everyone ought to be paying more. And there's a big problem with the fact that people filling up at the pump, who a lot of times need that money, do a lot of complaining about gas prices, are going to be asked to pony up a little more. But these folks under these tax rates are continuing to get cuts. And this just isn't corporate boardrooms, this is also banks and others. And I've even gotten into the inheritance tax elimination, which was passed a few years ago. The bottom line is the reason we are where we're at is because the finances and revenue streams have been mismanaged. It hasn't been a question of available revenue, it's been a question of priorities. And the priorities up to this point have been for the General Assembly to hand out tax cuts to a few, but now in order to fix the problem, we're seeing a proposal for tax increases for the many. Now, I want to make this clear. I voted for a motor fuel tax increase before it was necessary and lived to tell about it. But the worry out there in the street is that if we're going to do this, everyone's not being part of the game. And I would expect that next week sometime, House Democrats are going to be fine-tuning and presenting an alternative. We want to show ways that this can be done without the types of tax increases that they are proposing. And by the way, do I think that they're going to fall all over themselves and say, oh, Scott Pelath has it, that's the ticket? That's only my 1% expectation, but these points have to be raised, and I am hopeful that part of them can be integrated into a final package at the end of session that people can feel good about. So I wanted to raise some concerns along with one last one. And this is actually a left-handed compliment to my colleagues across the aisle. They've actually done too good a job at selling the health of the surplus. They've used that as an example of Indiana's great fiscal health. They've used it as an example of their fiscal stewardship. Even though I think there's a much different story to be told, that message has permeated into the public. And one thing I'm hearing quite frequently is, why are they asking for a tax increase when we have all this money laying around? That argument has to be overcome, and that's a consequence of some of the salesmanship that's transpired up to this point. Having said that, I have told each one of my members they have to make their own judgment. I want to make clear, I have not beat on a soul to vote one way or the other. I've told folks, look at the Republican plan, look at the alternatives. If you think that what the Republicans have proposed is sellable and will help the people in your district promptly, then feel free to make that determination. It's been my goal to avoid partisanship and have this be focused on practical problem solving in view of what the public is saying. So with that, be happy to entertain any questions.
Scott, looking at using the inflation calculator, that 18 cents in 2002, last year is about 24 cents, is if you count for inflationary purposes. So are you saying that the gas tax shouldn't be done because, as you know, being in business, costs go up, labor goes up, you lose purchasing power? Are you saying that there should be no gas tax increase?
I've never said that there aren't circumstances where that might not be acceptable, but it has to be the right circumstances, and the burden has to be shared, and people have to feel like it's being shared. So that's not an emphatic no, never. We want a good package. We want one that makes a substantial investment, but people have to pitch in, and we have to consider the revenue that's already being given away and is going to be given away. So, by the way, one more thing to your inflation argument. I've heard that one uttered before. That's the type of macroeconomic explanation that tends not to go over very well with those, because while prices may be going up, they're going up for everything. They're going up for everything, not just gasoline.
Is this year's road plan from Democrats going to be materially different from last year's?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
Well, I don't want to say too much advance because some of the finer points are being determined, but there's going to be a use of existing revenue streams along with some reallocations. There's also going to be a program set up for local units of government to be empowered to gain some of their own contracts using the remainder of major moves funds. But that's still being developed, and I will be making a final announcement on that in the coming days. I want to say too, there's also going to be an emphasis on local projects, if I can explain why. When you bring in a bunch of revenue all at once, a bunch of new revenue, there aren't enough state projects to put all that revenue to work right away. If you want to see an immediate economic impact, which people will expect if there's any, quote, revenue enhancers or user fee adjustments, they're going to want to see work done immediately, and locals can do that much better and more effectively and more quickly.
If you're talking about using existing revenue streams, are you talking about basically freezing any future decreases in the corporate income tax and sort of capturing, future tax cuts and directing that towards
those are very strong. Those are very strong considerations, because those things don't take a dime from anybody based on their current rates. There's one other point too. You have to remember that the individual income tax is also set to decrease in the coming years because of Mike Pence's campaign pledge. For the overwhelming majority of people, those things should be preserved, but we also have to remember that those are targeted at the highest income earners, because we have a flat tax in Indiana, enjoy most of the benefit of that. And we have to look at how that could be contributing to the overall revenue stream as well. Mostly it's a matter of working out numbers right now, because we're trying to find something that is substantially similar in size to what is being proposed across the aisle, because we care about boldness too.
So you're trying to get to $1 billion just with using different formula, different math.
Not exactly, but
Not exactly $1 billion, or
no, not exactly. I mean, the final number is to be determined, because some of it's also going to depend on unused funds at the state level, and those calculations have to be done.
Do you think it's a problem? You had really no Hoosiers come out yesterday. The hearing was 6 hours, and
Yes.
it was all corporations.
Yes.
And they voted without hearing from Hoosiers. I mean, what's the problem?
The first question I asked, because I was in here listening to a large portion of it, was there anyone testifying who wasn't being paid, hoping to get paid, or a Tea Party representative? I listened to Tea Party representatives the most, quite frankly, because everyone else, he knew what they were going to say. It was their job to be in there and say that. That's a problem. I think that this discussion needs to be opened up much more widely. I know that I'm going to be doing town hall meetings back in my own district here pretty shortly, because I want to hear what people have to say. This is not that complicated for a politician. You listen to your constituents, you get their suggestion, you try to implement them the best you can. It doesn't, you analyze the data and you consider the philosophical differences, and you look at alternate ways to do things, and you make a decision as a consultation with them. It's not partisan from that standpoint.
The Republicans are using the term user fee, which I think it's fair to say is a euphemism for tax increase. What do you think about their use of that term, and do you think it could be effective? They talk about the need to educate the public about their tax increase plan.
Well, I talk about the individual income user fee all the time. I guess that's, that is something that the public sees through very, very quickly. Just call it what it is, and they can be told the truth. It's okay. By the way, if the last election has taught us anything, is people have caught on to poll-tested language. Okay, they can hear their way through it. Just shoot straight with them, and the overwhelming majority of the time, they're going to give you the answer that you need.
Mr. Pelath,
Yes.
do you support the legislation about the needle exchange program, specifically allowing cities and other counties enacting their own exchange programs?
I think they're headed in a good direction, and that was one of the things on which I complimented Governor Holcomb. I thought that, now here I am using the word courageous. I appreciated him raising that in a State of the State address. I think that's important and pragmatic and realistic, and a pleasant distinction from his predecessor, who had many wonderful qualities of his own.
What do you make of what do you make of new Attorney General Curtis Hill testifying yesterday against the needle exchange bill, and basically coming out against the governor?
I don't think that was an ideal audition for the General Assembly. I think I would characterize my reaction as flummoxed. He could have called downstairs, see what the governor thought. That's not hopefully over time he understands that you can't approach important legislation, particularly those supported by the chief executive, with a knee-jerk reaction simply because you saw it on a committee calendar.
You had social media posts kind of dominate headlines this week, not from anyone within your party, but have you had any words to members of your caucus about to think before you share or tweet?
I do say that, and I say it repeatedly. Sometimes the advice is taken, and sometimes it's not. We live in an era where everything can be shared and everybody can see what's on your mind at the moment. And the only protection of that is to be mindful and realize that just because you think something is funny doesn't mean someone else is going to construe it that way. And when you're in public office, you're held to even a higher standard.
Do you think the embarrassment of the situation for Representative Lucas was enough, or should there be real?
I'm not here to beat up on Representative Lucas. I will say that in my experience, shame and embarrassment are pretty powerful tools. What the speaker decides to do is up to him. I've been through this. Sometimes these problems are bipartisan. I've seen members have on the Democratic side have difficulties before, and ultimately it's the most important thing is between them and their constituents, and also the way they reflect upon the institution. So I hope he's learned his lesson. If those types of things are repeated, it's probably going to be. I'm an HR director, okay, in my real job. Somebody does something wrong and they get the talking to, and the second time is the strong admonishment, and the third time you have to look at different things.
So speaking of HR, any thoughts on what you see with Indiana elected with workforce development? I know you guys have the bill right now that would sort of restructure, realign, to help close the skills gap and deal with underemployed Hoosiers.
Right. Speaker Bosman, I have strong agreement in this area. There's all sorts of things we agree on, and this is one of them. Governor Pence got off to a good start at trying to coalesce our workforce development related institutions and have a singular strategy, but he got distracted for palpable reasons. We need to get back on track. We need a singular strategy that coordinates our universities, even our vocational institutions, our high schools, and also FSSA and the Department of Workforce Development and the business community. Drilling down on why we need more nurses and how do we get more nurses into the marketplace. And I just use that as an illustration example. There are still too many cooks, and that's got to be improved.
Leader Pelath, there are a couple bills right now to give tax credits to employers for when their employees get a credential. What are your thoughts on that as part of the workforce development plan?
I think that's a compelling suggestion. That's one of those things there. I would tend to favor what works. I'm going to share my expertise here for a moment. I know with my own employer, we've looked for ways to compensate people for tuition if they get a higher degree that makes them more valued by the organization. There's not enough people to do certain types of work, and employers are forced to find ways to get creative and retaining the talent they have and growing some of their own in-house. And if we can cultivate that in intelligent ways, that's always worth considering.
Why not give a tax credit to the person actually getting the credential instead of the employer?
Well, that's okay too. That's okay too. It doesn't have to be an either or. It doesn't have to be an either or. All right. Thanks, everybody.